Welcome to my YouTube channel and to my train room. It seems a long time since I produced a video where I did a project to improve the layout. And indeed, it has been over a year since I worked on it. Well, today I break that trend, and for the first time in over a year, I'm doing a layout project for myself. So let me get the camera turned around and show you the nature of this week's project. My National Widget complex has been in this state for a couple of years now without progressing. Although most of the major components are in place, I'm still missing a lot of details. The biggest of those being the roof details on the main structures. Well, I bet you weren't expected to hear more narrative just yet. For this video, I decided I wanted to try something just a little bit different. Instead of gradually working up to the finished result, I've decided I am going to start by giving my viewers a sneak preview of what I've been up to over the last few days. So let me get behind the camera again and show you what the roof of National Widget currently looks like. Well, here is the National Widget complex as it stands at the moment. All the roof details have been built, although none of it's painted yet. You will have to wait until the end of the series to be able to see it that way. I like to have my rooftops really busy. To me, it adds a lot of interest to an industrial structure. And the great thing about a completely freelance industry like National Widget is that I can be inventive and make things up as I go along. Now, starting from the east end, we have a heavy-duty air handling system with some ductwork. We have a gantry crane. We have a large piece of machinery essential to the widget making process. Now, my thoughts on this is that the bulk of that machine occupies parts of the top two floors of the building, and that is just the upper extremities that you see there. And then heading to the other side of the main silo, we have some more apparatus attached to a couple of rooftop storage tanks. We have various vents, more ductwork, and the biggest single rooftop item, the billboard. And then heading over to the elevator tower at the west end, we see a rooftop water tank. I think this gives National Widget a much more interesting look. And the first thing I tackled was the billboard. I did some research on large prototype rooftop billboards, and in most cases the structure is rather similar to the gantry crane that I built some time ago. The main supports are basically about like that in many cases. I have a good selection of H and I beams in plastic. This is just the smaller ones. I put all the larger ones back in the drawer. I decided they would be too heavy. Now, although the frames for the billboard are a lot larger than they were for the crane, it doesn't have to support as much weight. So I'm basically using the same size material. And since I need several of them, it calls for a jig. Here's one I've already made. This one, the solvent is just hardening up. Using the jig is pretty straightforward. Note that since I'm using styrene components, I've made the jig out of strip wood. In theory, the solvent doesn't glue the strip wood very well. In practice, I've found that it does actually hold on a lot better than it's supposed to. And the first one I struggled to get out of the jig because it was a little bit tight, so I've loosened the jig up a little bit. Anyway, all I do is I just hit all the intersections with some solvent and then let it set up. Now, although it's not particularly heavy, it is going to be subjected to some pretty high wind loads. So obviously it needs to be anchored properly to the top of the building support columns. Well, after building the heavy base to allow the support columns to take the load, I decided I didn't like it. It's too clumsy. So what I did was I rearranged the sign I printed it just a little bit larger so that the A-frames can now be directly above the columns. And I can get rid of all of that, and there'll just be lightweight plates on the bottom that will be bolted to the tops of the columns, and I like that a lot better. Since there's now going to be no frame to attach all these together, the next thing I have to do is build the signboard and then use that to hold everything together. So I need to change gear, put all these parts aside. Here is the sign. I printed it on heavy duty paper. I've decided that National Widget is a patriotic company, so I created the sign in red, white and blue, and I've put 48 stars. In a few more years the sign painter is going to have to come along and add 2 more stars, but for the time being 48 is the right number. So let me get some sheet styrene to mount this on, and I'll be right back. Well, I've now mounted my sign on 20 thou styrene, and I've added a border of 2x8s to give it a raised edge. Now I could just glue the frames on the back, but that wouldn't be particularly prototypical. Now I'm going to start by putting these 4x8s on edge every few feet longitudinally, and those will tie everything together. I don't know how many I'm going to use yet. I only have about 6 or 7 left in the pack, so I'll just make it enough. Well, since these supports are approximately 20 feet apart, I decided that these were too flimsy. I'm going to go with the 6x12s instead. It would probably be tubular steel or something, and that would be fairly well supported over that distance. I've drawn the lines a little less than 4 feet apart. It gives an even space with just a small gap left top and bottom, and I'm fairly happy with that spacing. I've drawn vertical lines on the sign where the posts are going to be. That way, if I have to join any of these to save material, I can do so behind a post. Well, I've now attached the 4 main supports to the back of the signboard. I had to do it in 2 steps because the board was curving slightly where I laminated it. So I started off by just gluing the bottom 3, and then I let that go hard, and then I came back and did the other 5. Still a lot of detail to put on it yet. A load of cross bracing and maintenance walkways and all sorts of stuff. Welcome back to the second day of this project. I got a lot of the bracing on, and I started working on the maintenance platforms. The basic platform is pretty straightforward. That's not an issue at all. What's slowing me down is figuring out where the ladders go, because I have to have a ladder to the bottom platform and one to the top platform as well, and I'm trying to arrange them in such a way that they would be both safe and convenient, and so they look cool as well. I've now completed all the bracing that I'm going to do. I've been using 2x6 styrene strip. It gives it a nice flimsy look, even though it's still probably way oversized, overscale. Next I need to mount the lower maintenance platform, and I've come up with a plan for that. I've got these 1/2 inch square basswood blocks that came out of an assortment pack, and those will give me a gauge to hold it straight. So I'm going to glue these on and then cut braces to go 45 degrees under these. I've left it set up, and it is now nice and strong. Before I start working on ladders, I need another support on the back end of this platform. Anyway, while that's going hard, let me dig through my ladder stock and see what I have available. Okay, I still have plenty of ladders from Central Valley. It's part number 1602. I think I've showed my viewers these before. It's very reasonably priced, and you get 4 sprues like this with a good variety of steps and ladders. Well worth investing in a pack just to have on hand. But let's get back to installing this bracket on the lower walkway and then work on the upper one before I join them with the ladders. Well, I've got the ladders installed. I put hoops on the top of this one. In both cases I let the side rails run long and cut the top 2 rungs out. I've still got to cut this diagonal brace off, but I'll let that go a little bit harder first. And then I just need to work on the various safety appliances. There'll be a handrail along here, another one here, and one along the top. I'm going to make all of those out of thin brass wire, and then I could figure out how to light it. Well, I'm not going to put real lights on it, but I want some dummy lights, probably 5 along the bottom, 5 along the top, because this is a pretty big billboard. Well, I have made most of the handrails, the 2 main sub-assemblies anyway. The bottom one goes under there. I've got to drill some holes to put it in this bottom purlin, and then the top one goes about 3 feet above the top of the board and also has the light mounting brackets on it. I find the easiest way to make this sort of thing is with thin brass wire taped to a piece of card. And I have these really neat little lampshades which I'm going to install on the ends of those brackets. There's another one. Well, I could never have imagined just how hard it was going to be to install those handrails, but I finally got it done. The bottom one is none too straight, and I managed to break it here as well. Trying to glue that is going to be well nigh impossible. It's just too small an area and it'll just break again, and attempting to solder it this close to the plastic is going to be a recipe for disaster. So I think what I'm just going to do is accept the fact that it's broken and put a worker up there with a toolbox ready to repair it. Also, I managed to break the end of my ladder off here, drilling holes. I think what I'm going to do is make some more ladder hoops out of this thin brass wire. Okay, this is too long, so cut that off there. Most of the ends are too long. I'm not going to worry about any of those in there because they can't be seen. That's basically it. Oh no, there's some down here that are going to be trimmed. So other than repairing this ladder here and painting it, I'm going to call that done. Well, that completes this week's installment. Next week I will work on some of the other details. I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.